Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. The Cowessess First Nation discovered a series of, or hundreds of, unmarked graves this past week, and they are looking for help from the federal government to find the stories of these children that are in these graves. We as a society are looking for the federal government to make a statement about how it couldn't happen again, how they're going to change social systems so that they perform in a just manner and not in a racist manner. Justin Trudeau has made statements about how he wants to change how the Children and Family Services treats people, that Indigenous people, if a child is removed, that it stays within the culture of that child, that isn't swept across the country or swept to another community where there is no family support. Because Child and Family Services has been the new residential school for many children, that they move in and they take kids away and they move them far away from the community, far away from blood ties to family. And that may not necessarily be the way to go. We need to change that so the cultures are preserved, and Justin Trudeau has made a statement towards that. And the Cowessess First Nations, he mentioned specifically in the strides that they're doing to heal their community from residential school, from Child and Family Services, trying to pick apart the indigenous cultures. So let's listen to first the statement that was made, of course, by the Cowessess First Nations and their chief and others who are working on the grave site. And then we'll listen to Justin Trudeau's statement that he made about what is going on in our country versus residential school and indigenous cultures. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. In Saskatchewan, there have been found more than 700 unmarked graves in what would appear to be an open field. These graves are of children who were held at residential school in Saskatchewan. We're going to hear statements from First Nations leaders in that area for the Cowessess people were speaking about how they want to protect the grave site, the burial sites, so that people can heal from it, and so that the spirits of those children can be put to rest. We're also going to hear from Jagmeet Singh talking about that there shouldn't be these grave sites, that this sort of thing should have never been allowed to happen. And he's asking for a government to do something positive to help the Indigenous people across Canada to heal from it, to heal our society in a way that will ensure that this can't happen again, and to ensure that there is a trust among all of us who live in this country. He has been calling for a long time for things like that, systems to be rid of racism, and for systems to be show equality to everyone who walks through the doors of institutions. We agree with Jagmeet that now is not the time for just simple condolences. Now is a time for action, and the government can show that it believes that we are all equal by taking that action now to eliminate racism from systems and institutions, and ensuring that through legislation that scooping of children from anyone can no longer happen, that there has to be proof of endangerment and abuse before something can happen. Because as it stands now, the foster systems are full of Indigenous people because they can just simply lift them away the easiest and place them into care. Now is the time for our government to act and clean away the racism. So let's listen to what the Indigenous leaders have to say in their press conference about this burial site, and at the end we'll listen to what Jagmeet Singh has to say to the press about what has been going on.
Cadmus natisi kasu ni tukama kaniwin kausis isquimgunik. I say good morning to you all. My name is Chief Cadmus Delorme of the Cowes First Nation. Before I begin on the Merivale Residential School story, I just wanted to emphasize that the recent story of the Kamloops Residential School, 215 found graves, has triggered many across this country. And I just wanted to start off by reading two numbers that anybody that what I will share that may re-trigger that you can call. If you are looking for the residential school line to help with mental emotional, you could call at 1-866-925-4419. If you're more local in the Treaty 4 territory in southern Saskatchewan, we do have a line that's going to be open this afternoon. We have partnered with Regina Treaty Status Indian Services, and you could call them at 306-522-7494. In 1886, the Roman Catholic Church in the Oblades arrived on Cowes First Nation. And that is when the grave site began. In 1898, the Merivale Residential School opened its doors, and it closed its doors in 1996. The Roman Catholic Church overseen the gravesite. The Catholics and the prayer and religion overseeing the gravesite. We started our radar penetrating research on June the 2nd of 2021. As of yesterday, we have hit 751 unmarked graves. This is not a mass grave site. These are unmarked graves. Over the past years, the oral stories of our elders, of our survivors, and friends of our survivors have told us stories that knew these burials were here. In 1960, there may have been marks on these graves. The Catholic Church representatives removed these headstones, and today they are unmarked graves. At this time, I'm just going to share my screen so you have a visual of what we're talking about. You're going to notice that there are flags, and I apologize, it might be a little tough to see. But this is now today on Cowes First Nation, and this is what we call today our community gravesite. It became our community gravesite after the 1970s, when the residential school was stopped overseen by the Roman Catholic Church and the Archdiocese. We also wanted to show you a little more of a visual from a drone perspective. Of the 751 hits, the machine has a 10 to 15% error percentage. So we will only go by the hits that we have of 751, but we do know there's at least 600. You're going to notice that they are in proper order. These that lay here are 1 meter by 1 meter apart in some cases. We cannot affirm that they are all children, but there are oral stories that there are adults in this gravesite as well, because it was the Roman Catholic Church that overseen this gravesite. Some may have went to the church and from our local towns, and they could have been buried here as well. This could be triggering to many, but when you're from Cowes First Nation, or you have attended the Maryville Residential School, which many have in southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba, we always knew that there was graves here. The recent story of the Kamloops Residential School has triggered many in this country, and we knew this was going to trigger as well. There are many agree to disagree from Cowes on the history of this gravesite. But I want to affirm to you, we are talking about unmarked graves. We're not talking about a mass gravesite. Today in this country, First Nations people, and this instant Cowes, we've never ever swayed away from who we are as a Nehewak and Anishinaabe people. The Roman Catholic Residential School has impacted us intensely. And today we have generations that may have not went to residential school, but they are feeling the first and second generation of that impact. All we ask of all of you listening is that you stand by us as we heal and we get stronger, and that we all must put down our ignorance and accidental racism of not addressing the truth that this country has with Indigenous people. We are not asking for pity, but we are asking for understanding. We need time to heal, and this country must stand by us. We have reached out to the Government of Canada, the Prime Minister, Minister Bennett, Minister Miller, have reached out and told us that they stand beside us in what they can help with today. I have reached out, and they have reached out to me, the Roman Catholic Church, our archdiocese in this region. His name is Don, and we have talked as well. What we are going to be doing now is we are going to be putting names to these unmarked graves. We want to honor our loved ones that lay there today. We want to make sure that we keep that place and preserve it so many could come here and heal. It's going to hurt in the coming months because the more we put names to them, the more that it is going to reopen some of the pains that many endured at the Maryville Residential School are going to reopen. The gravesite is there, and it's real. And if you were to see it, there are 751 flags when you look at it. It is the pain of the memories of being in the school for many that it is triggering. And that's why I thank all of the messages, everyone listening, that I ask you to open your mind that this country needs to have truth and reconciliation. There's going to be many more stories in the future, and this is Cowes' First Nations moment of our truth. In the coming days, we will continue to do our research, and one day there will be a monument there. Every one of those graves will be marked, and probably not every grave will have the exact name, but that is our end goal. I thank you all for giving us this moment to tell our story. And I just want to rephrase, this is not a mass grave site. These are unmarked graves. And we didn't remove these headstones. Removing headstones is a crime in this country. And we are treating this like a crime scene at the moment. And we will know more as we continue our research. Again, to the ones that are listening that have went to residential school, that are descendants of residential school survivors, there are numbers available for you to call, and you are not alone. At this time, I just wanted to give a moment for our knowledge keeper, Florence Barbier, to come and share a few words before Chief Bobby Cameron. Florence? Yeah, right there. Just speak into there.
Okay. I'm 80 years old, and I went to boarding school down there. I was taken by my parents to go. At that time, if the parents didn't want to allow their children to go to boarding school, one of them had to go to jail. So in order that we keep the family together, we went to boarding school. They brought us there. We stayed there. And we learned, they pounded it into us. And really, they were very mean. When I say pounding, I mean pounding. Those nuns were very mean to us. For I don't know. I don't think they liked it being there either. But we had to learn how to be Roman Catholic. We couldn't say our own little blessings the way we said it at home. We had our own way of honoring ourselves and Mother Earth in our own homes when we were little, but we had to leave all that after. So when we were taught at home that we had to look after ourselves physically, mental, emotionally, and spiritual. So that got all stripped away when we went to boarding school. They told us what to say. They told us about a new being that was supposed to be our ultimate savior. But the ones we had in our school, they were not nice either. They were very condemning about our people. They told us our people, our parents and grandparents had no. They didn't have a way to be spiritual because we were all heathens. And I was the third one in my family that went to that school. My grandmother went, and my mother and me. So they were still teaching that all the time. So they were putting us down as a people. So we learned how to not like who we were. And that has gone on and it's still going on. Because we couldn't teach our people, our own families, how to look after themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritual. They made us, when we became assimilated, they made us think different and feel different. So it's a lot of the pain that we see in our people right now comes from there. Mm-hmm. So, and I went to another school, Little Brett, also, and that was the same thing. You know, they had they made us believe we didn't have souls. Both places. And that was the ultimate desire of all of us to, how can we be better, do better? And sometimes it's really hard to know. And how our parents had, our parents and grandparents had a hard life because they were had to be assimilated. So now we know how to do that. We don't have to go back. We just have to learn how to look after ourselves in a good way. So I thank you, Chief, for allowing me to come here and talk a little bit about it. I'm an elder under reserve. I have a sweat lodge. I stopped it now because I want somebody else to do it. But if you need an elder, you know, people want to come, they can come. I have a lodge. My husband had built me a little lodge, so that's where I see people. I don't tell them anything. I don't tell anyone who's there, but I'm busy. Thank you.
Back to you, Larissa. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you very much, Chief. We will now have Chief Bobby Cameron. Tony, can you please pin Chief Cameron's screen? Chief Cameron, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Larissa.
Perfect. All
Can you
right,
hear me?
yep, just for the record,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, this is FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron. He is the Chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, which represents the 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan. Chief, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, good morning. I want to say thanks and wago magantik. Nigan man to class kuman neo gisga megwats. Ega no kum no ko kum no class kum tinigagi someone igagi someone. First and foremost to our God, our Creator, for a beautiful day today. To our Nokum, our knowledge keeper, our elder, for the opening prayer. Thank you. Chief Cadmus and your community for the challenging work that you have just completed. We are grateful and thankful in our prayers to each and every one of your families there in Palaces. And to all that are on the line, that are listening, you have important work to do in terms of getting the message out there for the world to understand what we First Nations have endured for many, many decades within the residential school era, the 60s school, the day schools, and currently in the child welfare system, where there has to be and must be immediate change, where our First Nation children come home to our communities and be raised in our communities amongst our own language and culture experts. This was a crime against humanity, an assault on First Nation people. We are proud people. The only crime we ever committed as children was being born Indigenous. A lot of work, a lot of healing will take place. There are many sites that we're going to be doing this similar work, and we will find more. So we ask for each and every one of you to continue to work with us, to continue to pray for us. We call on all levels of government to work with us, and which they are. But in terms of the healing and the aftermath of moving forward for our survivors and descendants, what are the expectations and what are the outcomes? I would also like to say this on behalf of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. That we pray for all of these children, their families, and the community of Palaces. To all our First Nation people, please take care of yourself. Please take care of each other. We are seeing the results of the genocide that Canada committed here. Genocide on our treaty lands. We will find more bodies, and we will not stop until we find all of our children. We will do a search of every Indian residential school site, and we won't stop there. We will also search all of the sanatoriums, the Indian hospitals, and all of the sites where our people were taken and abused, tortured, neglected, and murdered. We will tell the stories of our children, of our people who died, who were killed by the state, by the churches, and we won't stop until we locate all of them. The world is watching Canada as we unearth the findings of genocide. We had concentration camps here. We had them here in Canada, in Saskatchewan. They were called Indian residential schools. Canada will be known as a nation who tried to exterminate the First Nations. Now we have evidence. Evidence of what the survivors of the Indian residential schools have been saying all along for decades, that they were treated without humanity. They were they were tortured, they were abused, and they seen their classmates die. They even had to dig graves for their own fellow students. Can you imagine that? These stories will come out. Canada will have to work with us in the spirit of reconciliation. Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Scott Moe have committed to doing this. And we will go the distance on this. We expect and demand a full and public independent inquiry into the genocide. We need to verify causes of death and identify these children. Our people deserve more than apologies and sympathies, which we are grateful for. Our people deserve justice. Canada can start by handing over all of those records. The churches can start by handing over all of those records. To all of our allies, we need support as we grieve. This is just the beginning of the number of children who will be found. As I mentioned earlier, we won't stop until we find them all. I want to say this on a lasting note. We try to put ourselves in the eyes and the bodies of these children who are now being found in the ground, who have been waiting for decades to have a proper burial and to be honored properly amongst their own protocols, traditions, and customs. And a small First Nations voice said, "They found us. They found us." Thank you for listening to me this morning.
Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. I want to begin by addressing the news that hundreds of unmarked graves have been found near the former residential school in Cowessess First Nation. This was an incredibly harmful government policy that was Canada's reality for many, many decades. And Canadians today are horrified and ashamed of how our country behaved, about a policy that ripped kids from their homes, from their communities, from their culture and their language. and forced assimilation upon them. This is a piece of our past, of decades past, that resonates and echoes and is and continues to be a lived reality of consequences for many, many Canadians today. So, specifically to the members of the Cowessess community and Treaty 4 communities, we are sorry. It was something that we cannot undo in the past, but we can pledge ourselves every day to fix in the present and into the future. And that means recognizing the harms, the impacts, the intergenerational trauma, the cycles of challenges that far too many Indigenous peoples face in this country because of actions that the federal government and other partners deliberately and willingly undertook. I spoke with Chief Cadmus Delorme yesterday, the Chief of Cowessess First Nations, and offered all of the federal government's continued support and partnership, not just on supporting the communities that are grieving for the discovery of these graves, but also on the work that we must do to help them heal, to create opportunities to move forward, including on the issue of child and family services. We know that even long after residential schools closed in this country, child and family service, in the stated purpose of protecting children's well-beings, continued to take them away from their communities, continued to remove them from their language and culture, and place them in foster homes in non-Indigenous communities all across the country. That's why one of the calls of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was to restore the care of kids at risk to the communities themselves. And in my conversation with Chief Cadmus, Chief Delorme, we talked directly about how we could even further accelerate the great work that Cowessess has already been doing on moving forward on child and family.
Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help. How we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.